I'm Tom Romito from Western Cuyahoga Audubon Society, and I'm here with Stefanie Spear. Stefanie, would you please introduce yourself to our audience and your affiliation?
Sure. Stefanie Spear. I am the founder and CEO of EcoWatch. EcoWatch.com is one of the leading environmental news sites. We report on a broad range of environmental issues and work to educate and motivate people to care about human health and the environment.
Well, thank you. Could you please describe your work and how you got into it?
When I was a college student, I personally became conscious of my impact on the earth. For me, it felt a lot like just a light switch. It started mostly with solid waste issues, but I was at University of Wisconsin in Madison, a really progressive town, in college, and just felt like people should have been more conscious. I became more aware of solid waste issues and the amount of garbage being generated in our student union every day, and I thought, wow, I'm aware that for me as a person, as a human, to be healthy, the planet needs to be healthy too. And once I, started on that journey, I was like, well, why aren't more people aware? Because once you become aware, you notice all the other issues. And I decided it was because they lacked education on the issues. So I started publishing a newspaper as a student back in 1990, and thought, saw that it was, starting to get more people engaged, and all of a sudden all these people started contacting me with all their issues, and I realized there was a huge need for a venue, a platform, a home for the news of the people that were rolling their sleeves up every day to protect our water and our air. So, that idea of educating people back then is really today when you see EcoWatch, that's the culmination of my passion and work trying to get more people aware and conscious of their impact on the earth and begin what I call a journey from a humanistic viewpoint to a biocentric one. People who just begin to connect the dots between human health and the environment, to people who are voting with their dollar every day. They're ready to join a protest. They're contacting their elected officials. You don't go from consciousness to complete enlightenment in a day. It's a journey. And so EcoWatch works to help people along that journey. Obviously, we want people to move along the pathway as quickly as possible, as our planet is in crisis and we need more people to be conscious and to make daily changes to their lifestyle so that we can be sure that we have a planet for future generations.
Well, Stefanie, that's an excellent segue to my interest for Western Cuyahoga Audubon Society, which is trying to garner a grassroots commitment to a public policy agenda about climate change and clean energy. I'm interested in your perspective about how to garner this grassroots commitment. Could you please share some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, fortunately we have amazing grassroots environmental organizations all over the world, including Audubon, that have members, and organizations are doing, I think, an excellent job, educating these members and people engaged on these issues about the climate crisis and other environmental issues. So I think it's vitally important that we keep getting out the news of the changes that can be made to transition to a low-carbon economy, and make sure that people become aware of what really are the most important issues and how they can become involved. So groups like the Audubon and other organizations, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, 350.org, Friends of the Earth, Rainforest Action Network, all these amazing organizations, making sure that they're doing their best to keep their constituents or their members engaged on these issues, and that it's not just policy that's going to transition us to a clean energy future, it's also individual action.
Thank you, and that's very interesting. The Audubon is a late comer to the climate change discussion. particularly at the chapter level, like Western Cuyahoga Audubon Society, and I personally have become a champion of trying to present climate science to an audience that is not necessarily attuned to that. They're interested in conservation. They're interested in learning a lot about birds, but not so much about climate change, or at least talking about it. So I would very much like to hear your perspective about the best way, if there is one, to present climate science to any audience.
Yeah, so climate science sometimes takes the conversation too far for a lot of people. And so, at EcoWatch I've learned to, break it up in many different, ways. Again, we're hitting a very broad audience. We call it all shades of green. And, some people love that climate science and want the figures and the numbers, which, we have plenty of articles that dictate that. But then there's a lot of people who they're just not going to digest that type of information. So we find articles like 10 foods climate change may, take away from our planet. So avocados is a big one. Those types of things resonate much better with our readers than per se, data, science data. So, but for Audubon, the impacts that fire power has on birds, and the fact that it emits carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gas, and any ways you can bring it to what their affinity is, their passion, I think can have a huge impact. And I've certainly tracked what the Audubon's doing, and their huge climate report they came out with, I think about 2 years ago, on the impacts of climate change on birds. And Audubon's position came out, very strong in reducing carbon emissions. So I think birders are just an awesome example of people who really, if they just can rally behind this, could have a huge impact on policy and their individual action. So I think the Audubon's challenge of getting more of their members engaged on the issue is similar to a lot of other organizations. So just finding that common ground and the pieces, parts of the climate debate, which may not be the climate science. There's so many ways to engage people on the issue of climate change that impacts their daily life. And, we just ran a great piece by Dr. David Suzuki that talked about how, species and where they live is changing because of the warming planet. So I know that's impacting birding, and I'm sure birders are noticing different species of birds that typically aren't in their region. So I think more honing in on something that's going to be directly related to their daily life or impact on their passions, may be the better way. A lot of people get very glossy-eyed when you start talking even about, 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to 2 degrees Celsius. Like, there's really important information in there. What we've had to do is take that 1.5 to 2 and bring in content that describes it in a way that, the average person is going to want to read. So that data is vitally important for people to digest and understand, but how you present it is definitely how well you're going to get people engaged on it.
Thanks, Stefanie. When you presented to a local public your report on the Paris talks, you introduced a topic that was new to me, and that was the clean energy economy. And to that end, when I talk to an audience, whether it's Audubon or even individuals, friends and family and relatives, I talk to them about how to promote alternative energy sources to enhance or to drive the clean energy economy. I've sort of found that this is the lowest hanging fruit, because talking about greenhouse gases or the melting polar ice cap or the rising sea levels just goes right over their heads. They don't want to accept that. But clean energy is something that everybody wants, because they don't want to live with dirty energy, either for them or for their heirs. So I would be interested in some of your perspective on how to promote the clean energy economy, alternative energy sources. Could you share that, please?
Yeah, one way we like to do it at EcoWatch is to just share the success stories. So there are so many success stories with renewable energy all over the world. It's just incredible. So that's one great way. And then there's really amazing statistics that have come out over the last many years that show that the cost for renewable energy, especially solar panels, has dramatically decreased. The amount of installed capacity per quarter, and even of last year, renewables are winning out. The fact that we know that we have to leave fossil fuels, the majority of the remaining fossil fuels in the ground, there's just no other choice. So a clean energy future, a clean energy economy, a world that relies on renewable energy is our future. Other ways I love to talk about innovation. I love to talk about Elon Musk and Solar City. I think he's the president of the board of Solar City, and then of course he's the founder and CEO of Tesla Motors, and the Powerwall battery, battery storage. Actually, I love content on battery storage that does really well in EcoWatch. I'm like, wow, people really get it, and try and steer clear, or at least set the record straight on myths about renewable energy. Yes, if the sun's not shining, the panels aren't generating power, but we can store that power. We have a grid. Our grid needs to be revamped, but there's a lot of new innovative ways to store energy today. Just the positive message that we are a world that can be powered by renewable energy, I think is a really great direction to go. And then you can start to talk about some individuals like Mark Jacobson from Stanford, who's come up with a plan of exactly how every country in the entire world and each continent can transition to renewable energy. And you read it and it just makes sense. So I think the more information, the positive stories of countries and places that are actually doing it to get that word out. I was super fortunate to speak at a climate conference in Copenhagen, and I wanted to go to the island of Samso. It's the first island in the world to go 100% renewable, and I had the chance to I spent about, I think it was 28 hours there, and it was amazing. Firsthand, I wrote a piece, a 5-page piece on EcoWatch that explains my entire time there, from solar and wind and all the things that they have integrated, and then talking about Germany and what they've done with renewable energy. So really pulling in these positive renewable energy stories that show that renewables work. And I think that is going to make people want to engage more and understand the importance of cleaning our air and our water, and the impacts of carbon and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as well as just how dirty it is for people. So if you're talking to health professionals or people who are more engaged in the health and wellness world, we can talk about the positive impact that changing to renewables has on human health. So I think just being on the high energy and positive direction toward where we can head, and showing the positive examples that exist around the world. One of my favorite thoughts about the transition to renewable energy is really looking at, they call it people who are in energy poverty. So there's places all over the world where people don't have energy, and what's so exciting is they are completely leapfrogging the industrial revolution, or the large coal-fired power plants, and they're installing their own community-based solar projects that are bringing electricity to the first time to their villages, and they own that power. So instead of going from the big centralized type coal-fired power plant, they're doing renewable energy stations that they own, and it benefits their community. So those kind of stories, I think, are fantastic, because they never had to deal, per se with, the big fossil fuel company coming in and building the big coal-fired power plant that makes the planet unhealthy, makes the people unhealthy. They don't then have control of that energy that they can't even afford. And Greenpeace has been a leader in that, as well as so many other organizations and companies, to bring this renewable clean energy to these communities for the first time.
I see. Well, thanks very, very much. This brings us to the elephant in the room as far as the Audubon Society is concerned. And that is that wind power is obviously an alternative energy source, alternative to fossil fuels. Everybody wants that, but nobody wants the birds to be at risk to wind power turbines. And this debate rages in the birding community everywhere, particularly in Ohio, because of the initiative to put wind turbines on Lake Erie. And the problem, of course, is that there is no evidence of post-mortality studies on the impact of the turbines on birds. The discussion is, well, what to do about that? Do we allow these folks to go ahead, or do we continue to press for studies of post-construction mortality on birds? What are your thoughts about that?
A topic I've given a lot of thought to.
Oh,
wind energy is an essential component and part of transitioning our world to a clean energy economy. And I think in exact relevance to the Audubon and to birders, I think that a lot of points need to be laid out. No question that wind turbine farms should not go in the migratory path. So there is need for studies. I'm confident that the migratory routes are fairly known. And so that absolutely should go in there. And I'm familiar with a lot of wind projects, the wind project on Lake Erie being one, and they have had to go through a lot of different studies with the EPA and the ODNR and the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure that the project won't have significant impact on other species. So, making sure that the process through NEPA or whatever type of environmental impact statement has to happen, has to be part of the program, just as if a coal-fired power plant was going to go in, or a nuclear power plant, or some type of energy generating facility. So there has to be those, pieces parts. But I do feel that we also have to pull into the equation the impact buildings have on birds. I've read many studies where, the number of birds killed by tall buildings compared to wind turbines, the tall buildings wins out every time on the number of birds killed. You also have to take into account the impact that carbon dioxide and mercury from burning of coal, what impact that has on our water, which impacts our fish, as well as our birds, as well as human health. So it's not just, what impact it has on birds if a bird is hit by a blade. It's, what impact, you have to look at the true impact that coal-fired power plants have on bird species as well. And if you don't bring that in, you're just not looking at a level playing field. And, mercury pollution, which comes from the burning of coal, which several different things happen. It goes up in the air, it comes down to the water. That's one of the reasons we have high levels of mercury in fish. If there's scrubbers on coal-fired power plants, then there's, there's leftover like coal ash that ends up, in these compounds, and they leak, and that ends up in our waterways. So you have to look at what is the true impact of coal-fired power plant, what's the true impact of wind farms, and take all of that into account when you're thinking about doing a wind project. So I think more education around the impacts of coal, which powers more than 50% of our country, in some states clearly more. We need to take all that into account. So I think further education on those issues is vital. And then where the projects are sited is the biggest piece of it as far as what potential impact it can have on birds. My personal feeling is we have to move forward with significant amount of wind projects. I prefer distributed generation projects where a solar or wind project is built to generate power for X for this particular facility, instead of just huge wind farms everywhere that powers a lot of different things. In order for us to get to the scale that we need to get to transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable energy one, we need to do these larger projects as well. So, but I think dialogue and debate are really great. I just think that the proper information and looking at all of the issues at hand have to be part of the conversation to really understand whether that particular project is a good one or a bad one. Under the premise, of course, that nothing is perfect. So, powering energy efficiencies is about as perfect as we can get, where we don't use what we don't need, and therefore we didn't have to maybe put up 300 wind turbines. Maybe we only had to put up 150 because we became energy efficient first. So, as I'm sure people know, efficiency should always be number one, the low-hanging fruit, prior to coming up with some type of generation facility, be it wind or solar or any other type of power generation.
Mm-hmm. We've covered a lot of ground here in this short interview, Stefanie, and the one area of concern to me as an Audubon member, as a public speaker, is trying to gather a diverse audience to bring into this conversation. Typically, when I go out to talk to the public, I find myself talking to the choir, people who are already believers in the need to reduce pollution, to save the earth. But that's only half of the people. The other half of the people are denying that climate change is even existing, or that it's even necessary to try and find solutions. I would like to get a diverse audience together in a conversation in the same room, both believers and deniers. I would like to hear your thoughts about the usefulness of doing that and how to do that, please.
Yeah, I think it depends on, if it's too polar opposite, I'm not sure at the end of the day the solution or time will have been beneficial. But if, my whole thing is if you start off with the same goal in mind, which is to leave planet Earth in a way that there's resources and ability for future generations to live here, then at least you can agree on certain principles to begin with. I think there's a lot of value in, having different people in the room who bring different things to the table. But I've seen, many times where if it's just, climate denier, coming, from, there is no such thing as human-caused climate change, to someone who wants to come up with strategies and ways to mitigate climate change, I'm not sure you're going to get that much out of that. So, one of our, at EcoWatch, we believe the consensus of 97% of the world's climate scientists that say climate change is human-induced, and that the release of greenhouse gases is warming our planet. So, so if you're starting at that premise, I think that there's a lot of value in bringing in people who may not think that that particular wind project is good, but you're both understanding that something has to get done. So convening conversations like that is fantastic. I typically will speak out at this conference in our day, and Chip Cummins puts it on and is able to bring together people from all over the world, and we're not all on the same page. Many different backgrounds and philosophies and thoughts, but we can all have conversations that end up leading to a more positive solution. But you have to, I think, have some common ground to start with to get to that level. And I'm under the assumption, which could be wrong, that most Audubon members probably believe that climate change is human caused. Do you think that that's true?
The jury is out on that, because even in my own group, my own network of conservation people, there are people who are on the fence. I've heard things like, we're already at the tipping point and it's nearly too late, or it is too late. Or there are those who will argue about the composition of greenhouse gases as though that's the most important issue. And I don't think it is. We need to get out of the weeds on this discussion and look at the greater good. And so that's where I am at, trying to include the people who want to talk about the science to that extent, and those who are kind of on the fence, along with those who are saying, yes, I believe in the science, you're doing right. So that's kind of where I am, trying to be an includer of all points of view.
Yeah, and I think that's important, clearly, to allow them as members of Audubon to have their say. And of course, I think Audubon as an organization has certainly come out, from what I understand, in that they do believe the consensus of 97% of climate scientists. Is it true?
Oh, absolutely. The National Audubon Society is fully on board with that. And I would like to know what to say to somebody who's saying, that's bogus study that came up with that number. What do you say to people like that? That's my the area that I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and it's not this one study, right, of course, that came up with that humans are contributing to climate change. It's hundreds, I'll even go as far as saying thousands of scientists, and there just was a new study that consensus on consensus. So it was all these scientists coming together, climate scientists coming together, that again say there's now consensus on the consensus that 97% of the world's climate scientists believe climate change is human-induced. We're fortunate to have Michael Mann as one of EcoWatch's Insights writers. He's one of the most world-renowned climate scientists, and he has the hockey stick theory, which is very famous, that shows exactly what they predicted was going to happen with the warming of the climate. So, I think there's plenty of information out there that is, I think, digestible for most people, that clearly explains what's going on. And then, we have many nations feeling, the impacts of climate already, and so there's lots of stories to be told there. So I think that bringing people together with the same or different viewpoints is very beneficial, assuming, I don't have much tolerance to debate people who, absolutely think that the climate that climate change is just a natural phenomenon and that humans don't have any piece of it. So, you know, we've been really fortunate with the support and ideology around Pope Francis and his encyclical on the planet and climate change has had a huge impact on educating and bringing more people in. And I know that when the report came out about 2 years ago with Audubon, that it was one of the leading scientists, birders, right, that authored the study. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that that rallied a lot of Audubon members to more clearly understand the issue at hand.
Clearly it did. It is a valuable piece of science.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that, you know, it's a time to continue to educate people on these issues. Not necessarily get in fights at Thanksgiving dinner, but, you know, we're fortunate today to have social media and have it so prevalent in people's lives. Some people may disagree with that, but it does provide a way for people to share what matters to them. And people are always like, I feel hopeless, what should I do? And, you know, we have a voice and we can use it in so many different ways today, with social media being one of them. And I think it lends a really unique and exciting opportunity to get more people conscious and aware of these issues.
Well, there you have it, folks. Education is going to be our strategy going forward, and it's just been my pleasure to be with Stefanie Spear, founder of EcoWatch, discussing this important topic. Thank you for listening.